Wait a minute.
I can have baked Layne?
Oh. Hey guys, what's going on? I'm here with my friend Steve Cook. So, Steve and I have known each other since 2009, I want to say.
It's been a while. Since I pretty much I very first got into the industry.
Yeah, you'd won the body space spokesmodel.
The bodybuilding.com. Yeah, I won the muscle and fitness male model search and the bodybuilding.com spokesmodel search. And I prepped doing my first physique show with Layne because he was a guy that I saw on bodybuilding.com.
Yeah, so now, I was going to ask you about that. Like, how did you find out about me and what? Because, I kind of bucked a lot of trends in the fitness industry in terms of bringing science into it, questioning a lot of things, doing methods a little bit differently than a lot differently than anybody else has ever done it. So, what made you buck the trend of getting a bro coach, right, and go with somebody who had a little bit more science background?
For me, it all started. So I played college football as a biology psychology major, and then after I got done playing football, I decided I wanted to compete in natural bodybuilding. So this was before men's physique was around. I competed in the NGA in Idaho, and then also the AFBB, the Alaska ABFF. It was the Alaskan Bodybuilding Federation. They had a show in Idaho. Don't ask me why. It was interesting, but I did an NGA show, then that one, and then another NGA show. I also did the Muscle Mania, which I thought was natural. But the NGA polygraph, urinalysis, so I was looking on bodybuilding.com. Layne was kind of, the natural bodybuilder that I think was most popular, in terms of, you got a lot of articles, it was you and Dr. Joe. I remember there's a lot of scientific backing stuff, and I thought, you know what, I want to do this the right way, and, with being on the NGA stage, I thought, you would have the most insight to going that route since you compete in the INBF or the
all of them. The alphabet
the alphabet,
exactly. Bodybuilding. Yeah.
So that's how I initially found you, and it was something that I had a local guy in Idaho that was kind of he coached me for my very very first bodybuilding show, and then after that I just kind of wanted to see. Again, bodybuilding.com was where I kind of went for all my info. Here's Layne talking about just amazing. I remember you had an article on Simply Shredded, and then you also had it on your website. Wow. And I think that was, I pretty much just looked at that Simply Shredded.
Was that the contest prep one?
Yep.
Yeah.
1.2 grams of protein if you're a mesomorph.
Yeah.
The ecto, meso, and endo. And I just remember thinking, gosh, this is the most detailed I've ever seen. That's what I want.
Yeah. And it was interesting because when you came to me, it wasn't like you knew a lot about like flexible dieting. We didn't really even call it that at the time. I just said, hey, the whole idea that you can't eat certain foods, that's kind of BS.
Taboo.
And I remember I was driving in the car talking on the phone to you, and you're like, wait a minute, you mean I can eat this?
Yeah. I think it was even a Subway sandwich I was going to eat before I went on stage.
Yes.
And it was like, wait, you want me to eat a Subway sandwich? And I even remember getting ready for the bodybuilding.com spokesmodel search, posting pictures of like Ezekiel bread, and like I was into cooking a lot more than I am now because I was traveling less. But I was into like making all these amazing meals that fit my macros. So like oat pancakes with apples and a little bit of like almond butter on there.
You can't have that.
Yeah, and I just remember people that I was competing with being like, oh, I haven't had bread in 12 weeks, and I was just like, sucks for you.
Well, what's funny is, you would see these people talk about like all the things you talk about, apples, oatmeal, all this kind of stuff. If it's separate, clean.
Yep.
Well, some people say fruit's not clean, whatever. But then you put it together in some kind of dish. Uh-oh. One of my favorite foods I used to break down the clean eating argument is air pop popcorn.
Yeah.
Okay? And
I know you're
the reason is people say, is that clean? Oh, it's not clean. And it's okay, well, it has more fiber and more protein content and less carbs per volume, way less carbs per volume than a sweet potato. So how's it not clean?
Because you put it in the microwave to cook it.
Yeah. No. Air popped.
It's air popped.
Boom. Don't even get the evil microwave waves.
Interesting.
So I use that a lot, and that's
baked Laynes were another one that you told me about.
Yeah.
I was like, I can have baked Laynes, and I started looking at the macros, and it was great. So I remember prepping on baked Laynes.
And did you honestly? And this is like, I'm not trying to lead you with this, but did you notice your physique get any worse from eating those other foods?
Not once.
Yeah. So when and actually, like I can remember, like before stage, you talked about the Subway sandwich. It's not that Subway sandwiches are magical,
right? Right.
It's that I was trying to get you some sodium, a relatively quick source of carbohydrate, and some fat. And that usually helps with people. A couple hours before stage, you get that nice sodium hit.
Yep.
That was actually another thing that was way different. That
the sodium hit.
I don't cut water.
Yep.
I don't really cut sodium. In fact, the day of the show, you found that you were probably drinking more water and eating a little bit more sodium. Especially
definitely
like 2
more
hours
sodium.
out.
Yeah.
We're giving you that nice big sodium hit. And what did you find with that?
A lot more vascular and a lot harder on stage, because there was one show that I did, and it was an NGA show, and I went into it and I did the opposite.
Yeah.
And I wanted to look really, really dry on stage, So I cut my sodium because I was like, oh, you know what? I'm going to sacrifice. I heard the NGA, it's more of a dieting contest, is what I was told, and it's not about necessarily looking big. You got great lines, Steve, but you need to come in leaner. You need to have more separation. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to do my own thing, and I'm not going to sodium load because I want to be really in prejudging. I was so flat. I could not get a pump backstage. All of that, obviously, potassium channels important for getting a pump.
Right. Well, what you don't understand is, like, if you're very flat, if the muscle is not pressing against the skin, you will look soft, right? So a lot of people, like, when they've gone low carb for a few days or whatever, and they don't look as good.
They feel like they need to cut harder.
When in reality, you may just need a refeed.
Exactly.
And when you're filled out, when you're hard and grainy, and you have enough sodium and carbohydrate and water, that muscle pressing out against the skin is what makes you look tight. Think about a balloon. If you took a balloon and you blow it up, right? It's stretched out. It's real tight. If you deflate it, it shrivels. It doesn't look impressive. Muscle tissue without water is soft, spongy tissue. It does not look impressive, okay? And people, you hear this all the time with people. They say, man, I look so good a week out from the show. Or what you really hear is they go out and they eat a cheat meal that night, and they post pictures the next day, and it's like, why didn't you look like this on stage, right? And they say, well, I must have just not carved up enough.
Right.
It's like, dude, you were eating 500 grams of carbs the 2 days leading up to the show. What happened was you went out, you drank water and ate sodium, and that's what allowed you to fill out. Sodium and water are not your enemies when it comes to contest prep. And
it's an axis. I mean, you have the carbs, the water, the sodium, to where
you can overdo it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You can spill over, and I think that even with a lot of people that I see, they're keto almost their whole diet. And then the day before, 24 hours before, they have like 500 grams carbs.
Terrible idea.
And all that does, the thing that I loved about Layne too is that was kind of unique. The carb up process really is like you gotta prepare to where a week out you are at your leanest. You need to be ready to go in terms of how lean you are a week out. And then what it is that last week, and it's interestingly enough, Arnold in his bodybuilding encyclopedia way back in the day. That's how kind of they did it. He says in his bodybuilding encyclopedia. Now the sodium and stuff might be a little bit different, but it was a slow carb up process because it takes time for the carbs for you to ingest them to actually get in. So that you're not going to get that instant full muscle glycogen.
Right, and you want to be in the proper place. I mean, a week out if you're still trying to lose body fat, I mean you can, but you're putting yourself in a tough position. And one of the things that's really the axis, you talk about the axis, carbohydrate, sodium, water. And most people get it wrong because what's the typical peak week? You load sodium and water early in the week, and you're cutting carbs, right? And then later in the week, you're cutting water, you're cutting sodium, you're loading carbohydrate, and you're usually taking a diuretic and loading potassium. All those things are working against you, okay? And here's the scientific reasons why. First off, you have kind of a balance of fluid across the cell. Ideally, we want a lot of fluid inside the cell, not much outside the cell, right? Well, when you start messing with stuff, that's when things can really get bad. And if you take water out, the body is still going to maintain that balance. It's called the Le Chatelier's principle. Okay, it's actually a principle in chemistry. So if you take that water out, like let's say you take a diuretic and you cut water, you will lose water out of the extracellular space, but you'll also lose it out of inside the muscle to maintain that same gradient, okay? And actually, since muscle is about 70% water, you're losing more absolute water out of the muscle cell. So all you've done is really flatten yourself out. But now you compounded this by reducing your sodium intake. So there's actually a study from Harvard back in 1991 where they took males and depleted them with sodium. And what you find is after 2 days, blood sodium levels don't change at all. They don't change at all. It's perfectly conserved. But what happens is your excretion of sodium goes to almost zero. And your levels of aldosterone, which is the hormone that makes you retain water, are doubled. Okay? So when do you normally start cutting sodium? Thursday, when the show's Saturday. So you're stepping on stage at the exact time that the hormone that makes you retain water is highest, right? And it makes you reabsorb sodium. And since you can't reabsorb sodium without reabsorbing water, you're reabsorbing sodium in water. But now you don't have the pressure in your vascular system because since you're low sodium, you don't have the pressure in your vascular system to hold it there and at least in the interstitial fluid. So now, congratulations, you've taken water and put it exactly where you don't want it. So the example I'll give to people, and also the carbohydrate transporter in the intestine, okay, that transports carbohydrate into circulation. Because you have to think about your GI tract as a tube, right? That's where nutrients go down and then they come into circulation. They get absorbed usually in the small intestine, most of them, in the duodenum. Well, the carbohydrate transporter is sodium dependent, okay? And they've shown that it actually can get downregulated by low sodium diets, all right? So now you're actually not getting as much carb. You're loading all those carbs and they're not getting in at the same rate that they would have if you had enough sodium. And a lot of people can get GI distress from that as well because they're going to have large amounts of undigested carbohydrates sitting in their GI tract. So you've done a whole host of things, all of which is going to make you look worse, okay? And so people...
It's crazy to me that for so long was just the practice too. How it got in there, I don't know, but it was almost like, you got to suffer. You got to, and I remember there was a popular fitness model that was talking about, you cut water and you just suffer, I cut water 3 days out, and it's just like...
And listen, if that stuff worked, I would tell people, hey, listen, because I want to win.
Right.
You know what I mean? I've competed. People forget that. I competed. I came across, like flexible dieting, this kind of stuff, I came across that because it worked.
Right.
It worked. If it didn't work, I wouldn't do it. I didn't do flexible dieting because I want to be able to eat Pop-Tarts. I don't load sodium because I want to be able to eat a lot of sodium. I do that because I feel like it's the best way for me to win. It just also happened to align to be a healthier practice,
Do you think it's true too? Now, you probably get this a lot. Natural bodies versus, big time bodybuilders.
I can answer this.
Yeah.
Because I've worked with several IFBB pros, most of whom want to remain nameless because they were usually working with me when they were saying they were working with bro coaches. Because the bro coaches get very upset when their apple cart gets shaken. And I don't care. I just want to help people and be able to get this information out to good people.
Right.
And so the part of the problem is that you have guys that are very hard workers, very genetically gifted. I mean, like you, Steve, even if we cut your sodium, cut your water, you might look bad for you, but you're still going to look amazing to the person who's sitting at home watching.
Lean
They're
is lean.
They're not going to know a difference, right? And so you will look, like if I took a picture of you carved up with no sodium, no water, you're going to look a little spilled over, a little bit flat, but you're still going to look amazing to the guy at home. You say, hey, look, this is what I did. I cut water. And they're going to think, oh, wow, right? So they'll use that as evidence. But look at so many IFBB pros who do this sort of stuff. Look at their gym photos a week out.
Yeah.
And you'll look on stage, they still look amazing.
Right.
But you look at their gym photos a week out.
They're not as crisp as they were a week out.
They're so hard and grainy and nasty and vascular. And then they get on stage, and where'd all that vascularity go?
Yeah.
Where'd all that graininess go? And what tends to happen, what you see is at the night show or at the second day of the show, they usually look better.
Yeah.
And that's because they relaxed a little bit, they've allowed themselves to eat a little bit more or drink a little bit more, and they tighten up.
True.
So it's one of those things that I didn't come across this because it was like I wanted to be different or it's just, but dogma gets ingrained, and it actually, I think it probably stemmed from people associate the wrong things, right? So wrestlers would diet and they'd get very lean and they would look really ripped, right? And then they would cut water to make a weight. bodybuilders just adopted that practice for whatever reason. Probably because wrestlers look lean.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it doesn't actually help you. You know. And people say, well, what about people on steroids? Steroids actually put more water inside the muscle. They're actually helping you.
Right.
If anything, people on steroids respond better to this stuff.
Okay, gotcha.
Steroids don't necessarily retain. Now, if you have a certain steroid that causes extracellular water retention,
right,
then that's something you have to modulate on its own, right? And I tell guys that I work with, I don't know enough about that stuff to be able to coach you in that. And I just handle nutrition. But the actual, it's not going to, if you stayed on, like let's say there was a certain drug that made you retain more water. Well, even if you cut water, you're still going to be retaining more water because of that.
Right.
They cut that out anyway.
Right. With things like different diuretics that
it's just going to make it. It's just going to make you look worse. It's just going to make you look worse. But the thing is too is a lot of times they're doing all the, why do prep coaches do this as well? If it doesn't work, well, if I just tell you, Steve, well, you can eat sodium, drink water, and you just gotta kind of track your macros.
No magic
say,
pill.
Well, I can do. I don't need him. I can do this on my own, right?
So true.
Whereas if I'm changing 5,000 variables, and then you don't look your best on stage, you go, oh, they'll usually be like, well, you screwed this one little thing up, right? Like, oh, your fish wasn't organic. Well, that was why, or whatever it is. There's always something that they can blame for that, right? Whereas if I screw you up, it's because I just made a mistake. And that happens.
And I see this a lot too. People saying, how you look on stage. Oh, I was holding water. I didn't cut out water soon enough.
No, you just weren't lean enough.
You just weren't lean enough. Like at the end of the day, like it just boils down to you just weren't lean enough. And there's no real way of getting around that. And that's the last 2 or 3 weeks. It's going to be rough. You're going to be, have carb brain, where I'm forgetting my keys. Tile apps, by the way, actually saved my butt from, I threw away my wallet last week on low carbs. Thankfully, my sisters got me these, because I forget things everywhere, traveling and everything, and I found my wallet by ringing it. So I got to say, carb brain is definitely real on low carb days. That was the 3rd low carb day I had been on it, but for me, like I like training like an athlete. I like doing the sprints. I like it brings joy to my life. So
hard to do that when you're really really suffering.
It is. But I think that that's why I also think the flexible dieting side of things. It's one less thing that I'm stressing about. Like it's one less thing that like if I can't get back to my house for a meal, I know I'm gonna be just fine going to Chick-fil-A and getting my grilled nuggets, getting a Cool Wrap, and it's just macros. I'm just subbing fat here and there, and I'm fine.
And I think you brought up why have people done this way for so long in terms of the peak week stuff, and it's the same thing I think with flexible dieting versus bro eating or bro clean eating, this sort of thing. There's comfort in numbers.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You may be screwing up, but if everybody else is screwing up too, at least you feel. I had a gal who actually, and Courtney would actually know her, but the first time she prepped with me, she's like, I know what you're saying makes sense. I know it makes sense, but when everybody else is cutting water backstage,
I gotta cut water.
I'm like, well, if everybody else is jumping off that bridge, would you want to go too? But there is safety in those numbers.
It's so true. It's so funny too, because you'll see people. And this, they're not lactose intolerant, but they cut out milk or they whatever. It's fine. But then right before they go on stage, they're eating milk chocolate or they're eating things and it's like all of a sudden that's okay or whatnot. And I always think that's interesting.
I think that's one of the big takeaways from peak week is don't do anything crazy.
Right.
Like don't sacrifice 20% trying to get 2.
Right.
If you're shredded, you're shredded.
Right.
So I always tell people with you, I just don't want to screw you up.
Right.
I'm going to make sure that you're right there. And if we can get that last 2%, great. But if it, sometimes things happen that are out of your control, and people want to, put things on. But it's like if you go in the gym, do you always feel your best? Even if everything lines up?
Nope.
Some days, some days you feel like crap going to the gym and you crush it. Right?
Yeah.
Some days you feel great. You've had enough sleep. You've eaten enough. You've had low stress, and you come in, you go, it's just not there. Right. So not everything's within our control, and that's why it's even more important to kind of, dance with what brought you. right? Like if you've been, like I tell people, like if you've been doing keto, don't do a 500 gram carb up. It's not going to end well, right? Like you want to stay within whatever.
So many people kind of freak out in the last couple of days.
Change everything.
Jelly bean suppositories.
Jeez, yeah. I mean, I've heard it all. I mean, I really have. I really have heard it all. And I think, you know, with regards to peak week, it's one of those things where you really want to be. Yes, you can make some tweaks to get a little bit more, but if you're not shredded a week out,
that's on you.
You got to be within striking distance. So.
And another thing, you know, on the real quick on the training side of things, you know, I always loved too when I first started in this, is that I remember prepping actually for the. I always tell people this, and they always blows their mind. I prepped for the Bustle or the Bodybuilding.com Fit Body contest, and you know, I trained in a way where I was doing heavy lifts still. Like there's always this dogma that, you know, when you're dieting. Yeah, I would cut out maybe certain lifts. I wouldn't be doing crazy bent over heavy rows or anything the last out because I didn't have enough cushion. But I would still be doing those movements, just with a little bit less jerkiness to it, I guess. But what I was saying is that I got on stage and won this show that same day because I felt good, because I wasn't cutting water, because I wasn't sodium manipulating like crazy. I went over and I won a pull-up contest. I hit 42 pull-ups on the day of the show.
That's crazy.
And people were like, How did it just is a testament to it's not some magic formula where you totally cut out water. Like I felt good on stage that day. I had a Subway sandwich in me.
If you feel good, you're going to pose better.
Right.
You can be more confident. You know, all those sorts of things. So, you know, I have, you know, for people who are interested, more interested in this stuff, you know, I have a peak week series on bodybuilding.com that's great to check out.
Love that one.
Or, you know, I do. It's funny because people ask if I coach, you know.
You're coach.
I'm like the OG online coach, baby. But, you know, it's funny because I don't really push that much anymore.
And, again, I love it because it's, you know, when I get done prepping, I won't change the foods I eat at all. And I think that's kind of the name of the game. Like, when I get done prepping for this show, the only thing that's going to change is the amount of calories I eat. Maybe the macros will change a little bit depending on what my goals are. Increase some things slowly, reverse diet, and that's what's the cool thing. It's like my life doesn't drastically change.
Yeah, and that's, you know, I'll kind of end on this note because we talk about sustainability and balance, and you know, you're always going to be in certain areas of your life, you're going to be unbalanced no matter what you do, right? Like, so when I was in graduate school, I was unbalanced towards grad school, right? When my kids were born, I was unbalanced towards family. When I was trying to build my business, I was unbalanced towards business. When I was competing, I was unbalanced towards competing. So you're always like walking that tightrope. And when you're walking a tightrope, what's going to happen? You're not going to go straight down the middle, right? You're going to go over here, and then you kind of have to correct, and you end up going over here, right? And so you always want to stay on the tightrope. And over the course of your life, what you want to do is be able to have balance, right? Over the course of your life.
That is such a huge word in our industry.
You just have to be mindful too. You have to understand that, like, when you're going to do a show, and you know this, like, you set it up, and okay, I'm going to be a little bit more unbalanced for this period of time. But I'm not gonna sustain that forever.
Right, you know? and that's exactly what it is, you know. And this is part of the reason why I love working with Layne, because I don't want to have to stress moving out here to Arizona, trying to open up my own gym, traveling, going to Australia right after. I know that, like, okay, I have somebody that I fully trust who's going to be making sure that I look the best I can on stage day, and that takes such a weight off of my shoulders.
Yeah, and. Like I said, you know, if you're interested in inquiring, you can email info@biolayne.com. If we can't accommodate you, or if I can't accommodate you, I have a list of coaches I trust we can refer you to. Hope you guys have enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you next time.